where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Rain Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. There is an age-old debate in the creativity space. You hear it a lot for filmmakers, for writers, for artists, for entrepreneurs, about should we spend our time thinking and planning and plotting out what we're going to do and establishing our plan thoroughly, or should we just take the bull by the horns and take action? Well, that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. This is episode 162, and this is what I would call an eternal debate among creatives, among filmmakers and writers and the like. But I think it's been even hotter lately. Maybe I've just been tuned into it more. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on TikTok and other social media in these spaces talking about these topics. And you have a lot of people, a lot of gurus, perhaps, teachers, mentors, creators, etc., thought leaders, whatever you want to call them, that say, just take action. Quentin Tarantino said, just go make your film. So many filmmakers say this, just go make your movie, just go make your movie. Writers the same way, just write. You want to become a better writer? You want to become a professional writer? Just write. And the backlash to that is, and I see both sides often, and I know a lot of people in both camps, if you will, and many of them and their views and opinions are quite well founded. So the pushback to that, just take action advice is, it's not really helpful for somebody who's never done it before. Like, what do you mean just go make a film? I have no clue where to begin, what to do first, what to do second, what to do 32nd out of a list of a million different things it takes with many different people to produce a feature film or even a short film for that matter. So what do you mean just take action? I have no idea where to start. And listen, that perspective, that point is super duper valid, right? If you don't know where to begin, then how can you just take action? It's like, just go play a piano, just go start playing basketball, you know? No, it's not exactly that. However, here is my perspective on that. When you look at the two, when you look at theory versus application, people studying structure and studying the greats, I'm in the storytelling space, right? So the way I see this most evidently is in people talking about structure of stories. Now that applies to filmmaking or writing, both of my two worlds that I exist in the storytelling space. And the idea would be focus on theory, learn what makes a good story, learn good structure, and build your story that way. However, so many people who are successful and actively doing the job, they are filmmakers, they are writers, often they say the opposite. Don't worry about the structure, just get out there and write. Find your voice, make the types of films that you want to make. Just go take your iPhone, find some friends, and go tell the stories that you want to tell. That's what it takes. Now, it's strange because these are the people that have done it and are successful, and we look up to them and we want to believe that, right? We want to follow their advice because they're doing the thing that we want to do. But I also hear the pushback on that being the most egregious, maybe I will say, is I've even heard people say that advice is actually intentionally vague and misleading to keep the competition out of the pool, basically, which I honestly think is quite absurd. That I am not telling you to learn how to structure your writing as a professional writer, but rather I'm telling you just to write, because that will keep you off track for long enough that you would never, threaten my position as a writer. Like, people say that. I've heard many people imply that. Here is the issue, though. When it comes to theory and planning and plotting and focusing on structure, thinking versus doing, right? You don't get stuck when you take action. But I know plenty of people, and I am one of them, that can get stuck in thinking. Because what do we do as people? We overthink. We overcomplicate it. We focus on this, that, and the third, and often we get stuck because what's really going on in our heads and our hearts is that we're scared. We are so tied up in this idea that we want to put out into the world, or this version of ourselves that we cling to, that we have some inner identity that we believe we fit, but we haven't actualized it yet. And we're so scared to get out there and do it because of the risk of learning that maybe we're not supposed to be that person. And that is scary. I understand. I have dreams too. So for a variety of reasons, you get stuck in analysis paralysis or shiny object syndrome, or thinking and overthinking and fear and being a perfectionist or a procrastinator because you're scared to put it out there. However, you do not ever get stuck in action. Now, you may take the wrong action, and that's okay, because that action inherently leads to another action, which also may be the wrong action. But now we're getting into process of elimination. Then you take another action that doesn't get you further down the road. It's just a lateral move. That's okay too. But when you keep doing that and keep learning and keep iterating and keep taking action, eventually you learn enough that it leads to the right action. Studying it in a book and structuring it to death is not how you learn. You don't learn by thinking and reading, you learn by doing. I can read how to do basketball drills for 10 years, for the 10,000 hours, right? And then go pick up a basketball, and what's going to happen? Is that immediately going to apply? No. Conversely, I can go out there and just start dribbling a basketball and do that every day for a year. Do you think I'll be better than that year? Of course. Same thing with playing piano. Same thing with storytelling. You have to get out there and just start doing the work. I think it was Alex Hermosi who talked about this. He talks about this a lot, I believe, that quality beats quantity every day, every time. It's always going to win out. But the irony is, in order to achieve quality, you have to go through quantity. You have to output enough to receive input on how to make your output better. And that's what gets you quality. Now, ideally, the best of the best, and what we want to aim for is quality and quantity. But my goodness, now that's a catalog, that's a career, that's a lifetime's effort to get there. But the first thing you have to do is take reps. You cannot get better at these things that are art by learning. Can you get better at math? Yeah, absolutely. Can you get better at bricklaying? No. You got to go out there and start laying bricks and understand what happens when the heat or the moisture hits it, or how much weight can sustain on a certain degree of a retaining wall, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a stonemason, clearly. You have to take action, otherwise you can get stuck. However, this is why it's an eternal debate, because it's not one way or the other. Just right works if you have to choose one of the two. You actually do the work when you take action. You're actually doing something. So that is how you really learn. You make mistakes and you iterate and you get better. So much of this I've learned since co-founding a startup. And you also see what works for you and what doesn't. This is the thing that structure will never teach you. If we all write a story about hunting knives using the hero's journey, it's going to be very similar, right? Instead, when you take action, especially in storytelling, but in any art form, I will argue, you find your voice. You find the way you like to tell stories. You find the types of stories that your audience responds to specifically. Theory is not going to get you there. Theory is going to show you what the other people did. And all of those people are telling you, hey, I found my voice by getting out there and using it. You develop your own style. And this is what's so crucial. The best practices and the rules and the formulas and the structures are irrelevant unless you understand how to communicate to people the way you want to, how to tell the stories that you want to. You don't overstructure it and then reverse engineer it and build something that way. You build it by putting the pieces together and understanding when something doesn't work, how to adjust it, learn from that, and make it work, especially in an artistic or an entrepreneurial endeavor. Now, ultimately, like anything, it is an art and a science. It is intellectual and emotional. This is the balance of life, my friends. This is the yin and the yang. And guess what? You need both of them. I'm not sitting here behind this microphone telling you to just go out there and write your story. Just go out there and make your film. But I am telling you that action weighs more than thinking and theory and planning. They're both important. When we talk about taking the leap, for example, I often say that people always say that this is the equivalent to just take action or just go make your movie, but they rarely talk about what you do before you leap. You step back a little bit and you take 5 or 6 quick little stutter steps, really strong strategic steps to launch you over that edge. Rarely do you just go stand at the edge and just fall, because that's pretty risky, right? So you get a running start. So there is a little bit of planning that needs to go into it. You have to start with a hypothesis and a direction, and you need to learn in order to formulate that hypothesis and that assumption and that direction. You're not just born with it, right? So that is true. I have a hypothesis based on what I've learned, what I've experienced. Now I'm going to go test that by taking action. This is what it comes down to. Action is just testing and understanding. You're getting out of the book and into the lab, right? So when you take the leap, that is all emotional. That's all heart. And it doesn't happen unless you take action with your heart. Now, after you take the leap, if you want to do something and build upon that and not just jump off the cliff, but you want to learn how to dive, or maybe you want to leap over a certain line or jump into the inner tube, if we're going to keep going with this metaphor, like we're taking the leap. If you're trying to accomplish something more specific after that, then yes, you have to start doing some math. You have to start learning. You have to start structuring and planning and thinking about what you're going to do. However, none of that happens if you don't have the first piece, which is the heart to take the action. None of that happens, even though there are a few strategic steps that precede that. So if we take that metaphor and apply it to storytelling and structure specifically, structure is not what you build with. Structure happens later. I believe Paul Guyot, a screenwriter, said that on my podcast, if not something along those lines. And I've heard that echoed before. You write and make the film with your heart, and then the structure, you can build it and manipulate it later. It's the same thing as taking the leap. You can get better and do it more efficiently and do it in a better way for your audience. But at first, you have to just be out there doing it. And I promise you, I've seen so many people get caught in the trap of never doing it. You can get caught in that trap of inaction by overthinking forever and never do it. But think of all the people that have been out there just making mistakes, making crappy movies, writing crappy blog posts, and eventually they get better. They get better. But at least they are trying, at least they are learning and improving. Now, of course, you have to learn. Some people don't do that. Structure happens later. When you write from your heart a scene that you think is powerful, a story that you think is powerful and will resonate, then you go back through and manipulate that story to say, how can I make it even better? How can I spike that moment of tension? How can I pull the audience lower in that moment of despair? You go back and you add these things to it. I do this in my own documentaries. I don't predetermine a theme. I shoot the film, I see a theme emerge, and then I go back and through my edit, I reinforce that theme. Just this week, I heard David Chase talking about the Sopranos show. He was being interviewed about the ducks in the first episode and how they represented the flight of his family potentially leaving him, and that's why he was so emotional when the ducks flew away, is because he was scared of losing his family. Well, David Chase was like, we didn't even plan that. There was something else that inspired the ducks that he thought would make it a good scene, but they were fortunate in that, inherently part of that story of The Sopranos was Dr. Melfi, the psychiatrist, Tony's psychiatrist. So she would go back 2 or 3 episodes later and ask about what happened, a couple episodes back when she would be in their sessions. And so the writers had to kind of put their mind into a therapist's mind, a psychiatrist's mind, and psychoanalyze the scenes they had written. What does that really mean? Oh, and then they realize these beautiful themes and symbols that emerge. And that's because they trusted their gut as writers. They trusted their heart. And they were able to do that because they've been doing it for a long time, not because they stayed in the room learning how to be good writers, but because they've been writing a long time. They inherently understand people. Here's the beauty of it. Your voice and that understanding of people is already inside of you. You don't have to go seek it out from a book. It's in there. So the journey to becoming better at being a storyteller is not out there. It's not in the books. It's tapping into your heart, because you're human just like the people you want to enjoy your story. That's what you need to resonate on. What is your gut telling you would be funny or scary, right? Then you go back and you add shape to it. I'll give you an example for me, and we will end on this. I have made a goal. I have been doing documentary films for 20 years. And last year I made a goal that I want to finally start getting some of the screenplays in my mind that have been in there for a decade or more out onto the page. And I want to start transitioning into creating my own narrative fictional stories. So I have dedicated myself to writing screenplays, 3 per year if I can. That's my goal. 2 would be amazing, and that's still a pretty good rhythm. Now, last year is when I really tried to make this happen, and I took a writer's retreat that my wife had given me for, I think, Valentine's Day. This was early March in the spring. Got a log cabin in the woods of Virginia. Brought Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I know. Though I see a lot of storytelling gurus still touting, that book. But most of the screenwriters that I know drag it for probably appropriate reasons. That's not what this episode's about. The point is, I took a book to use structure and build my screenplay that way. And I wrote a few pages over that weekend. I think I got close to 10. I have had this idea for a while. And then I didn't write another page until January of this year. Now I finished that screenplay in May, and I am almost finishing my second screenplay of the year by the end of this month, August, and we'll be starting my third in September. Now, what happened there is exactly an example of what I'm talking about. I tried to structure my way into it. I wrote out the beat sheet, and I made the outlines, and I did all the log lines, and I did all the stuff in that book. And it got me a little bit down the road, and then I completely stopped. And the only thing that got me to the finish line was telling myself, I am going to write a minimum of 5 days a week, every week, and I'm going to mark it on my calendar like Jerry Seinfeld does with a big red X so that I can see it. And if I don't see that red X, it just causes me pain. And I set that system up so that I didn't have to focus on and use wait till I was inspired or motivated to write, and I didn't have to just lean on self-discipline and willpower to make it happen. I had a system set up and I had a process, and I showed up every day and I did the writing. Now that story got so much better because I would be writing the scenes and I would be getting them out, and then I would see other opportunities as I went back and rewrote them, and a lot of it just came straight from the heart. Now one might argue that, and you had all those outlines before. You just sat down and finally wrote it. Potentially. But then I'm on the second screenplay now with no outline. I mean, a little bit of an outline, but no structuring every beat sheet down, et cetera, that I had done on the previous one. And I'm on page 80 of that, almost to the end of that, getting better each time. And I'm excited to start the third one. However, that is just my story, and that does not mean it's yours. And so ultimately, what I want you to remember from this show is that it takes all kinds. And one way is not the only way. I'm just sharing with you my experience, but it is always both. It is always the intellectual and the emotional. And whichever one of those helps get you going and further down the road is the one I want you to focus on. For me, it's taking action and leaning into the emotional part of my being. And for many other people that I look up to. And I know a lot of people that talk about the other side, structure and thinking and planning. But I cannot speak to their success in moving the needle forward. That's not because they haven't, but I just don't know those examples as well. Either way, there are a million different ways up the mountain. You need to find the one that works for you. My name is Rain Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab. This podcast is a 6 Second Stories production. 6 Second Stories is a story coaching and consulting company that builds online education, in-person and virtual training, and digital products that help businesses master storytelling to find their ideal customers and market to them effectively. You can learn more at 6secondstories.com and purchase the book 6 Second Stories at Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, or rainbennett.com/6secondstories.